Father, you mentioned that you had been all over the country and you met some very fine people. Could you give us an example, for instance, of some constructive thing that has been done?
I certainly can, Loretta. I can give you hundreds of them. But here's one that I think will interest you in particular. I was down in Texas not long ago, and I met this 23-year-old Baptist school teacher. She said she'd read an article about the Christophers in a magazine. And the point that she liked best was its emphasis on what little people can do to change the world for the better. She said, and it was wonderful to hear the way she said it. She said, you know, for the first time in my life did I realize a little person like myself counts. And then she went on to explain that she was teaching in schools. It was hard work and so forth. But she said, most of the girls I know are getting out of the teaching field. They say there's not enough money in it. The pay is too low.
Well, after all, Father, they do have a point. They don't make very much money, do they?
That's right.
Well, there's something
Father, is it even a living wage?
Well, I think for most it is, Loretta. It's a living wage, but for many not. And that's part of our job, to get a better wage for them, too. But this girl had a very fine solution for the present. She said she was going to stay in there teaching. And moreover, and this was the important point, she said, I'm going to become a committee of one and get as many girls as I can to get in the teaching field. It was wonderful to hear her enthusiasm. And then she said, I got my first recruit yesterday.
Well, Father, tell them one about the young fellow in the gas station.
Oh, yes, there's a nice point to that story, Jack. This young Negro student was working his way through college, trying to support his family. He had a job at a filling station. A little bit of prejudice developed, and about 10 or 12 people stopped buying gasoline. The man, the owner of the station, was quite worried. It was only a small business that he had, and he felt that he had let the man go. Word got around, and this little housewife heard about it, and she felt she should do something. She'd caught this Christopher idea. She should reach out to the world, and here was a specific opportunity. So in a very nice way, she walked down to the station and asked if there was anything she could do. And this man was so surprised. He said, well, you're the first one that's offered to do anything. Everybody's complaining. Nobody's doing anything. But she said, how many customers would you lose if you kept him? Well, he said, I don't know, about 20 maybe. She said, if I go out and get you 20 new customers, will you keep them? He said, I certainly will. She went out and got 25 new customers. One of the big magazines picked up the story and carried it to at least 15 million readers. I dare say that maybe 1 million people have done things through her example. She wanted to reach the world. Well, she did reach the world.
Father, I read a story in Reader's Digest about that Russian school teacher, Madame Kasenkina, wasn't that her name? Now, wasn't that in some way connected with the Christophers?
I think that's an ideal story to illustrate what one little person can do. Some time ago, I talked with a young couple who live on a farm in Connecticut about the Christopher idea. This young couple have a wonderful farm, 6 children, and 64 cows. And when I talked about the Christophers to this lady, she said, listen, we got enough to do right here. And furthermore, we're buried off here in the middle of Connecticut. And I said to her, I said, well, I don't care whether you're buried in the middle of Alaska. You can still do something to help the world. The world needs people like you. Well, I thought I'd hear nothing about it. 6 months later, she was sitting at breakfast with her husband and read in the morning paper about this Madame Kasenkina, the Russian school teacher who'd been taken a prisoner. I imagine 100 million people read about it and said, isn't that too bad? And then turned to the want ads or something like that. You know the old story. She turned to her husband. She says, Dan, we can't allow a thing like this to happen in our country. Let's do something about it. He said, fine, I'm with you. Her brother, a young lawyer, came up from New York for a quiet weekend. No sooner does he get in the house than Louise goes right at him. She says, Peter, we must do something to help that poor school teacher. He wants to get out of it. He said, forget it. After all, it's not our business. And she turns to him. She says, it isn't our business? If it isn't our business, whose business is it? Well, he was sparked. He went right through with it. He got a group in New York to help him obtain a subpoena. He carried it himself over to the Russian consulate. He stood across the street wondering how he would ever get in the hands of the Russian consul general. He was standing there hoping and praying for something to happen. Something did happen. Up drove the Russian consul general, steps out of his car, hurries up to the front door, and fortunately left his key inside. And he rang the bell. Meanwhile, Pete saw what was happening. He rushes across the street, and it was quite a job, but he got the subpoena in the hands of the Russian consul general. Well, everything began to happen. The word of this went all over the world by radio. And by a strange course of events, it went right into the room on the 3rd floor of the Russian consulate, where there had been a radio left by accident, and here, seated, a prisoner, was this Russian school teacher. She told us afterwards that when she heard her name over the radio, when she looked out and saw hundreds of people milling around outside, she came to just one conclusion. Somebody in America was fighting for her. She didn't know who it was, but it thrilled her so much she just wanted to jump into America. But how could she do that? She went to the window, and as she looked out, here she was on the 3rd floor. But that wouldn't stop her. Nothing was going to stop her if she could just save her life. Anything. She saw a wire stretched across the courtyard. She felt if she could only hit that, it might break her fall and save her. She jumped. She nearly tore off her hand, but it broke her fall, and she was very seriously injured. It took her months to recover. But when she did recover, she had only one request, and that was to see the one person who had thought out into the world to help a little person like her.
Oh, Father, that's a marvelous story, and that's what the Christophers can do, huh?